today, let's make a silk braided headband. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today we are going to be making a satin, silky, or brocade type headband. It's going to be really fun. You're going to want some sort of satin material. I find the best way to cut this is using like a rotary cutter, and then you have a ruler to help you. You could use scissors, it just makes it a little bit easier when you have that rotary cutter for the nice sharp edge. Next, you're going to want some thread, as well as you may want a thinner needle. If you start to notice that your satin is kind of snagging, the thinner needle will help it go through. And then in addition, you're going to want some pins as well as a safety pin, since we are going to be using some elastic to bring the headband together. Now for the elastic, you're going to want a 1/4 inch thick elastic, and I'll be telling you even more about all of this. It's all available in the pattern on my Etsy store. Use code headband23 for 30% off. Now we're going to actually start cutting out our fabric. So for the satin, you're going to want 3 strips that are going to be 36 inches long by 2 inches. You can see the cat is here the entire time we're doing this. So I used my ruler to cut out that 36-inch length, and then I just divided that large rectangle into smaller 2-inch strips. So this allows us to have the braided material that we're going to be having on the top. Now in addition, you need one more rectangle. This one is going to be between 7 to 8 inches long, and then you're going to want this to be 3 inches wide. So this is where our elastic is going to be going. It's going to be at the bottom of the headband. So now you should have 4 strips, so you have those 3 long and thin strips, and then that one strip that's a little wider, a different shape. So for our fabric, all this fabric has a right side and a wrong side. So as you can see here, the right side is shiny and then the wrong side has more of a dull look to it. We are going to be folding all of our rectangles along the long edge with right sides together. So as you can see here, I've just folded this up and I'm going to pin it along that long edge for all 4 rectangles. So including the rectangle that has a different shape than those 3 other ones, we are pinning these all up along that long edge. You could use pins, you could use quilting clips, whatever you have on hand, and you just want to pin them all up so that we can take a seam across all 4 rectangles, as this is going to allow us to have all clean edges when it comes time to actually putting this whole headband together. So once they're all pinned, you're just going to take a straight seam all the way across for all 4 of those rectangles that you have. Now for your sewing machine, this is just a quick reminder, if you do want to change the needle, be sure you do that ahead of time. The needle I have in my sewing machine is already good, so I'm going to be sticking with that size. Now we're just going to take that straight seam all the way through for all of our rectangles. If you start to notice any snagging while you're doing this with your satin, you could always change the size of the stitch to be a little bit smaller. Now when you're sewing this, be sure to backstitch at the beginning as well as at the end. That way you get a nice secure stitch and you don't worry about any of this coming undone, especially since we are going to be manipulating it. We're going to have to turn these right side out as well as braiding all of them. So you just want to make sure that everything stays together really, really nicely. So now I have my 4 rectangles all sewn up. So that one rectangle that is shorter, a different size, you're just going to put that to the side for now. And I'm going to use a safety pin and I'm going to turn the other 3 rectangles right side out. And the way I'm going to do this is you're going to attach the safety pin to one end of your rectangle that has now been sewn. So just kind of attaching it to that one short edge up there. You want to be sure that this doesn't go all the way through the fabric, so you want to keep that opening still open, and it's just kind of attached on there. And now you're going to turn the safety pin in so that it goes into that hole or that opening for where we have the fabric. And then just very, very gently, you're going to be kind of working that safety pin's way through your fabric loop. And you may notice that you may have to kind of help guide it along so that it will turn itself the first time. But once you get it started, it should be fairly simple to then just continue on turning the fabric right side out. Now part of the reason why I am using satin for this pattern is because it does have that silky effect. So it has almost like a slippery property where it should be easier for you to turn. When you get to the end, you'll be able to see that the safety pin does come out, and you will just very gently kind of pull this out so that you can finish the whole turning process. So at any points, if it ever kind of bulges up or you can't get the safety pin to go through, just be sure that you're very carefully working everything through itself, because you don't want it to rip at any point. Now once you have it done for one of those rectangles, you can now just go through and repeat these exact same steps for the other 2 rectangles. Once you have all 3 nice and turned out, we're going to be layering them on top of each other. So as you can see, I have all 3 together, and I'm just going to take a straight seam all the way across. So you can do this as one stitch, you can backstitch this. It's basically just holding it in place for us, as now it is time to braid all of these, which this is a fun part. Stuffing was definitely very interested in all the fun little string-like effects. But now you're just going to braid it all the way through. You can take your time, you can kind of set this down on something so it has a little more tension. Once it's around 15 inches long, check it on your head to see if it's the correct sizing, if you like how it fits, and if the braid goes down past your ears on either side. If it does, you can now just take a seam directly across to hold it in place. With this said, it's now time to move on to actually constructing the full headband, so we need some elastic. For the elastic, I cut out a 7-inch piece of elastic. This ended up being a little bit too big for me, so I think 7 inches is a good starting point, and then you could always cut this, make it smaller if need be. If you are on the size that you have a larger head in general, you may want to make it a little bit bigger as well, whatever works for you. Now I have my braid, and as you can see, it has this extra fabric and material on one end, so I'm just going to cut these off as I'm not going to need them. It's just going to be getting in the way. Then I have the elastic, and then I have that other rectangle that we had sewn up earlier. So it's time to put all three of these together. So what we are going to basically be doing is layering these effects so that we're going to be putting our braid into this rectangle. So I have not turned the rectangle right side out yet, but you can see that I have the right side of my braid matching the right side of the rectangle, and I'm going to have it go to one edge. So you can see here that the braid is now all the way through the rectangle, and I'm going to be taking my safety pin again and adding it to one end of the elastic. This is going to help us in a future step, but very important that you do this as it will be much easier to manipulate and work with our elastic. Once you have the safety pin on your elastic, what you're going to be doing is taking the edge that does not have the safety pin on it and pinning it to that edge that now has the braid, the rectangle, and then now your elastic. And we're just going to be taking a straight seam across to connect all three of those pieces together. So for this seam, be sure that again you are back stitching it, that you are holding it in place, and then just very slowly work your way through sewing those three different layers together. I didn't have an issue sewing this, but if at any point it kind of starts to bulk up, just be sure to take your time and go nice and slow through it so it holds everything together very well. And then at the end you can just double check that the braid, the elastic, and the rectangle are all sewn in. Stuffing was still very much involved, just taking a nap the whole time. Now it's time to cut off any extra fabric that you may have, so I know that I kind of cut off a little bit as well there. But you can see that I have the elastic, the rectangle, and the braid is on the other side. So now what it's time to do is we're just going to be turning this rectangle right side out. It should be a lot easier since the braid's already attached, and so now we have the elastic is sort of in that tube, and then we have the right side of the rectangle and then the right side of the braid. So we're not able to see any of those raw edges. We are eventually going to be top stitching across this, but I saved that for one of the last steps that I did. Now, the side that has the elastic with the safety pin, you're just going to be pushing this all the way through the rest of your headband. At this point, you can kind of do some tests on yourself to see, does it fit correctly? Do you like how it's laying on your head? Is it too big or too small? Now, I went ahead and trimmed up a little bit more of the braid so that it would lay nicely inside that tube, and what we're going to be doing is inserting that end of the braid into the end of our elastic tube. So we're going to be folding in the elastic to that rectangle about a 1/2 inch. You want to make sure that you cannot see any of that raw edges, and it all kind of ends up looking nice and clean. And then I did pull the elastic all the way out just so that I could do a better gauge of how large I wanted it to be. Now I'm going to be putting my braid into the tube, so kind of everything is now being held together, and this is going to be hiding the raw edge of our braid. This takes a little time to just make sure that it's all laying properly and everything gets sorted out nicely, but you will be able to get it in there. Once you have it laid out exactly how you want to, go ahead and pin that together, and this is also pinning that elastic, so you can see at the end that I still have my elastic out. We will be trimming that up after we sew it. So now just go ahead and take a straight seam all the way across. I was able to get it so that my elastic wasn't seen, and I did take the safety pin off once I got that pin on it. So you can see the bottom has that really nice scrunched effect, and now it is just time to sew all of this in place. So there's going to be 2 stitches that we are doing to hold everything in place and nice and securely. The first is going to be about anywhere from like 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch down. So this is where we are holding in place our elastic, the braid, as well as the elastic tube. So you just want to be sure that you're back stitching at the beginning, then you're going through taking that straight seam, and then you back stitch at the end, as this is the first step in making sure that our headband is going to be secure when we put it on and off and it's stretching it. Once you have that seam done though, you'll be able to take it off your sewing machine, and then you can just go straight into top stitching. So here you can see I have that first seam done, and I made sure that I got the elastic, everything is nice and secure, and I'm just going to go through and top stitch this probably about 1/8 of an inch or so, so very, very close so that it kind of acts as a little guide or like a way to hide any of those raw edges or the elastic. So this is what it now looks like. So I have those 2 seams, and I'm just going to actually repeat this on that second side as well. So I talked that I was going to top stitch it too. I'm going to do the exact same pattern of top stitching it so that it looks the same on either side. So here is what my headband looks like. I love how it turned out. It has such a pretty color, this fabric as well. Now all it's time that's left to do is we need to trim any of these extra little threads off and just clean everything up. So you can just go through using your scissors and just trim off any loose ends. Now this is the headband. I think it turned out really, really well. You can do this so quickly and easily. You can make these in a bunch of different colors. And since it is a satin, it will be nice and smooth on your hair. You could definitely do this in a brocade material. I found I made this one. It was slightly more difficult just because the fabric is thicker. The thinner fabric you use, the easier it will be to turn everything right side out. Be sure to check out the pattern on Etsy. Use code headband23 to get 30% off. The link is in the description. If you like this video and you want to see more, be sure to like and subscribe.